Craft Byte. Today, we're joined by Virginia Toombs, who is the VP of Engineering Operations at EverQuote, and she's going to be discussing how her team created a positive data-driven culture using DORA's efficiency and speed metrics as a foundation. If this is your first time joining us at CTO Craft Bytes, let me tell you a bit more about this group. CTO Craft is a mentoring and learning community for technology leaders around the world, focusing on supporting our members in their leadership growth. The community has tens of thousands of members, and CTO Craft provides them with coaching, mentoring circles, a curated Slack community, international conferences, and events like this one. If you're not a member of the CTO Craft community and are interested in becoming one, or if you'd like to get updates on these events on emails, we're just posting some links in the chat now that will help you do just that. I'd like to say a huge thanks to CTO Craft sponsor partners, which helps to make these Bytes events possible. Partners including AWS, Google Cloud, O'Reilly, and Pentalog, amongst many others. CTO Craft membership gives you access to some unique benefits from some of these partners, so click the link in the chat to find out more. And we'd like to say a big thank you to Code Climate for sponsoring this particular event. So hello, I'm Zoe Cunningham. I'm a director at Software Technology. I've worked there for over 20 years. It keeps inching up to nearly 25 now, having started as a coder in 2000. And now my role consists much more of engaging with the tech community through events like this one, and that also includes hosting the software podcast Tech Talks, which is available on all good podcast platforms. Today, I'm joined by Virginia Toombs, who is, as I mentioned, the VP of Engineering Operations at EverQuote. So, Virginia, can you kick us off by telling us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Well, look, thank you so much for having me today. We were just talking before, and Zoe asked me if I'd done many of these, and I have to say no. So, like, bear with me. I hope I do an okay job, but we'll see. We'll see how we go. Zoe, very funny. You said you've been in your role for about 24 years. I have also. I think I started my software journey in November '99. So
Right.
That seems like an awful long time ago. My name's Virginia Toombs. I started software engineering, 99. I was a software engineer. I was then a systems analyst, business analyst, and latterly like delivery lead, and a number of delivery kind of roles before I joined EverQuote, and we formed sort of engineering operations as a function, and I'm currently working there as the VP of engineering operations. So yeah, quite a journey, and we've seen a lot of change in the software industry in that time, and working through the early days of waterfall and requirements documents that had to be knows it seems like a crazy world now.
I'm sure we're not the only ones. I'm sure there are people watching too who remember the massive requirements documents and
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I know. You never know. I don't know. It's maybe like floppy disks, and they're just a thing that people talk about used to happen. Who knows?
Thank you very much. Yeah, can you tell me a bit maybe about EverQuote as well? And I suppose what about the business and what the business is trying to achieve, and then maybe how your team fits in within that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I should point out actually what I'm speaking about today are my own thoughts and beliefs, not those of EverQuote. But yes, let me tell you a little bit about EverQuote, and then engineering operations itself, which is where I work. So EverQuote is an online insurance marketplace. It's based in Boston, and we have an engineering department in Belfast, Northern Ireland as well. So engineering about 120. It's multi-site, multi-time zones. We have 17 engineering teams, and they all have aligned product managers. We work closely with business stakeholders, and they might include analysts and data scientists as well. So a really well-formed engineering department that I'm super proud of. So engineering operations was a function that we sort of created as a sort of central role within engineering. And the idea was to sort of empower teams help sort of foster that innovation spirit, and create an environment where engineers can really thrive. So, you might find us optimizing processes, leveraging best practices, encouraging collaboration, coaching on agile techniques, doing some facilitation, and then using metrics to measure, data-driven techniques, to really sort of inform decision making and then drive organizational improvements. So, and I know today that's even the data-driven stuff is what we're going to be speaking about.
Yes, it's a really interesting relationship as well, because actually, as you were describing, I was like, oh yes, the department that takes all the deployment and everything off your hands so you can just get on with like solving creative problems. Is that how it works? Is there also sometimes some conflict in terms of you're trying to create uniformity and shape everyone, or is it just support and everyone's super thrilled that you're there to support them?
Oh, that's a good question. So, I guess there's always that sort of dichotomy of like you want to empower engineering teams, and we work really, really hard to do that. So, you as an engineering team, we really try and keep teams long running. So, a minimum of 2 years, you work together as a team. Sure, things happen, but bringing the work to that team and allowing that team to really grow and mature is really, really important. So we want to allow them the autonomy to do, make their own decisions. At the same time, then you've got 17 teams. You have to have some, synchronicity and trying to, have some standards. Because if you don't, measuring things becomes really difficult. So that we have had conversations where you're trying to bring somebody on board and help them understand that actually we want to be able to look at the system as a whole and how well we can deliver software through each team, and sometimes that means them making choices to move away from a particular tool in order to adopt one that we're all using. So it's tricky, but it's all about communication. So if you give somebody something and just tell them to do it, it's not going to be as successful as if you help socialize the reasons why, talk about it a lot, give them a decent time frame, and trying to make it as easy as possible, all the while going, this is for our benefit. This isn't just some sort of archaic rule that we're putting in place. I think it's going to be more successful. And I think, honestly, I think our story of how we've made data and collecting engineering metrics successful has been that communication and making people feel that they're bought into it. That is the most important thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that my experience has always been engineers, out of all the different teams in an organization you can work with, are the people who respond best to, this is why we're doing this.
Absolutely.
You can't just say, we're just going to do this, it's just the rule. That's not going to go down very well. But actually, if you explain why, people are very keen to get on board and very keen to help.
Oh my goodness.
So, yeah.
Software engineers are incredibly intelligent people. Incredibly. They're interested in everything. And actually joining EverQuote, that was one of the things that really, really struck me, how engaged and motivated and keen to know what was going on and be part of things. I mean, every meeting that we had, the chat was going mad with people just engaging, and it was just, it was so fun, but it also made you have to up your game in terms of communication. People aren't going to just respond to tell me, being told what to do. So that is an exciting place to be, but it also, it's so important to bring people along on your journey, and understand the why. And I think maybe isn't that part of the sort of agile practice as well? We're not just, there isn't that separate business analyst or, business person over in a corner telling people what to do. There is that whole collaboration between product management, product owners, or whatever role you have there. But they're working so collaboratively with the team on a day-to-day basis, delivering and thinking of the solutions as a whole. And that's the success. People are they're bought in. And engineers then are part of the solution, not just being told what to do.
Yes, absolutely. And that brings us very well onto, can you tell us a bit about your kind of data-driven approach to essentially, I guess, looking at how everyone's performing?
Yeah. So we've had an interesting journey, and one that I'm super proud of for us as a team. So I joined EverQuote a few years ago, and in the interview process, and this may be the same with many engineering teams, but they're like, we're very data driven, we're very, very data driven. And I said, okay, yeah, well, that's great. I love that. I love that. And you know, it's one of our values, data centricity. We have, you know, analysts and data scientists. I thought this is really cool. And then I went into one of the first meetings where I had to provide a chart on as part of the meeting, and everybody immediately went, "That's nice, but can we please see the data behind that?" And it was hilarious. It was like, this really, you know, they really are keen to see that. So a very data-driven company, and one where you know, data is embraced as something that can be used and to make us better. So,
And I guess just from that comment there, right? It's people who understand the depth and complexity of data, that you can summarize data actually in all kinds of different ways. And it's only if you see the full underlying data, you understand the full picture, right? I think that's a very sophisticated understanding of data.
Yeah, very much, very much. So yeah, you have to be ready for that. And yeah, it's awesome. It's really, really awesome. So you know, we are an incredibly data centric company. And so and even I don't know if you'll be watching this back, but I'm sure you won't mind me saying our CTO as well, Dave, totally data driven and super excited. I know that if we talk about this, he just gets so excited about what we can do in terms of data modeling and looking at patterns and how better, you know, we can do things. So that's really good too, having somebody who is really motivated to drive that. So yeah, and then a few years ago we're like, okay, well, you know, measuring engineering productivity and all sorts of things, we'll get a tool. You know, there's lots of tools out there. That seems like something we really should do, and this will be exciting. And we were all really stoked about that and how it would go, and it was not a success. I know, and there's lots of tools. I'm not blaming the tool. I won't tell you what it was, but it was a combination of just the way we implemented it, the communication around it as well. It was a little bit too, hey, we've got this thing that we want you to use now, and we were so excited about it. We started talking about the tool and the measurements in one-to-ones, and in you know, in meetings where people then felt that it wasn't the process that was being measured, it was them. And that's not a good place to go with engineering metrics, because then you make people think, oh no, you know, I in some way that I am being judged. And
yeah,
nobody wants to feel like that. And that wasn't the purpose. It was just us being clumsy in terms of, you know, how we were implementing this. And it kind of backfired. People were then like, oh, well, you know, they weren't on board with what what really could have been quite an effective way of looking at things. I think also what we'd chosen was not mature in terms of throughput and flow metrics. It was quite specific in terms of like little, you know, the very detailed engineering metrics, which again, we went straight into the detail without actually thinking, well, we want to look at our whole system and we want to think about those flow metrics. So yeah, we had a bit of work to do there in terms of really undoing that, and really taking a step back and looking. And as engineering leadership, we went, right, this hasn't gone well. we need to really think about how we're going to approach this again. And it was a real combination of some of our engineering managers writing some Confluence documentation on the why we want to do this, what we should be doing, and really we all pitched together and thought, right, let's just start again. And that was really, really useful. I'm trying to get everybody on board.
It must have been tough though, right? Because actually you've invested in a system, you've invested time and energy implementing the system, right? Even if it wasn't working. I think it must have been a very hard decision to take, to go back and start again. Or was it simple because it wasn't working?
Yeah, it wasn't as hard as I thought it would be. Yeah, I know what you mean. It was. I think we realized that. Yeah, it wasn't quite right. And we were so invested in thinking about how we would, I think maybe it was because data-driven approaches were in our bones, and we were like, no, we're not giving up. This is not right. We'll do it again. And we genuinely wanted to be the most efficient, effective engineering company. We really wanted to improve, and that, we were always trying to drive for better and try, and you're only going to do that by measuring what's important. So we really needed to try again. So we did, and we went in with a new approach. We talked a lot more about what we were going to do and how important it was that we actually that we started measuring things. But at the same time, engineering operations, so very small team, there's only 2 of us right now, but engineering operations, we were also working with teams on, so we have Scrum teams and Kanban teams. We were working with teams on their own, the metrics that you have from Scrums, like their velocity and their burn down or burn up charts. So we were starting to help them work together better. So we were working from a team perspective.
And I guess like the different perspective here is that there's a big difference between data you're producing and consuming for your own use and data you're producing for someone else to consume that actually doesn't benefit you in the immediate, right? The difference between helping teams make their own metrics. That's what you're talking about, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So that's exactly. So they had their own metrics, and we were helping them see that, we were going in with, these are your metrics. These are, and here's how you read these charts. Here's how you interpret it. Here's the process around which you would discuss them, at the end of a sprint, or very, very simple things around, just, this is for you. This is not, there isn't an engineering leadership committee sitting looking at you, all this and measuring you. This is literally for you to improve. And so we were starting to have those conversations with teams, but it was all team focused. So there was no sort of individual conversation. It was all how do you collaborate together? And that is a much healthier conversation to have, and I think a much more psychologically safe one as well. We have principles of you work as a team, you succeed and fail as a team, and you're all in this together, and that was a really, really important concept for us to get over, and one that I feel very strongly about. So we were doing that from an engineering operations perspective. And so when we brought this, we thought, okay, we're going to use a different tool. We brought a different tool in that, we did a lot of sort of research, and we found one that, really had much better analytics in terms of flow, of throughput, of that sort of system thinking of at a team level, and I'm sure they won't mind me saying, but Code Climate, hi, we're your friends. That was what it was. So it was really good, but that the conversations were really, really important in terms of at a team level, how can we improve how you work together, and then therefore how you can be more efficient in terms of delivering software.
So having the right tool helps, and having a better tool and doing the research and finding the one that works for your organization and for what you want to achieve or what you want to get out of the tool. But that's not it. That's not the process. The process is not you find the best tool. It's then Absolutely. About how you work with people to implement it.
Very, very much. I mean, we probably could have just, you could use the spreadsheets and put the data in, if you, I don't know if you use, whatever you were charting. And I have in the past as well, just, create a nice chart out of a spreadsheet, sure. But it's having those collaboration, communication and collaboration with teams, with individuals, to make them feel that this is for them. This is not top down. This is literally, how do you improve yourselves? And that's really important. So we were starting to do that. The other thing we did was we got out the Accelerate book again. So do I have it here? Yes, I do.
Yeah.
This is the original. And we started thinking, okay, we're doing a complete refresh of metrics. We want to think at a system level. Let's look at the Accelerate book and think back to what, high level, what do we want to start with? So rather than looking at the tiny little granular engineering metrics that you could choose, let's do that. Let's look at the DORA metrics. And I was also really, I felt really strongly that one of the, and I was trying to look back to see which one it was, but one of the DORA reports talked about the culture of psychological safety, and said that teams that embrace psychological safety, that feel safe, are more successful in terms of performance. And I was like, bingo, that kind of really resonated with me. It was, well, of course they do. I mean, it kind of seems common sense, but that's what we were trying to do as well. It's like, you make people feel safe, but also it's good for their productivity. It makes them deliver better because they're that higher trust.
Yeah, but even from an informational perspective, right? We're trying to get information to improve the system. As soon as you think that sharing information means it might be used against you, the first thing you're going to do is shut down and withdraw and not share the information. And it's that information that's causing the system improvements, right?
Exactly.
So it again, for me, it feels really obvious. I'm surprised that people miss it, because it feels so obvious, but obviously we all do.
I know exactly. So like, I thought, well, that really resonates. That's what we're trying to do. I think DORA is going to work. So let's look at DORA and see where we can go. So we did that, and we use the DORA metrics, the lead time for change, and the production deployment frequency, more than the others, and that's been really helpful. And then, of course, as part of those, if you see bottlenecks or issues that you want to that you need to delve into, that's whenever you can actually drill down and start looking at the more sort of, the minutiae of some of the other metrics, and say, okay, well, I can see from, our lead time for change that, for example, our PR cycle time is the issue. It's not actually getting it out to production. And then drill down there and say, well, actually, it's the time to open, or it's the review period there that, and then you can sort of get into the more detail. But having that sort of overarching high level approach first has been really, really, really helpful.
And I guess it's also stopping you being distracted by noise, because we're living in this world, aren't we, of increasing amounts of data.
Yeah.
Trillions, or there's new words, aren't there, for how much data there is in the world, because the trillions isn't big enough anymore. And so if you start with looking at the details across everything, you're likely going to be wasting your time, right? Because how do you know which bit is the most important detail bit to be looking at, unless you've gone from top down, right?
Yeah. Yes, that's true. So there's a whole huge amount of data that you could collect. Where's I actually have it on my bookshelf. Measure what matters. So trying to work out what is actually important, and so what are you actually going to action? So are you collecting data that is just sitting about and you're not doing anything with, or are you actually collecting metrics that you're going to do something about? So yeah, for sure. The other thing which I do whenever I think about metrics is compare them. So look at correlations between data. So the co-climate velocity tool, but I've actually done it manually as well, has a way of looking at a scatter chart, and then you can see the correlation between two sets of data. You know, if there's an up and to the right, then you know that it's a positive correlation. So you can look at, for example, PR size and PR throughput. There is a correlation there. So the larger your PRs, probably the fewer of them you're getting out. So, you know, again, seems obvious, but looking at the correlation between different types of data is really helpful to be able to say, okay, well, we can see, and you know, here's the evidence that the larger your PRs are in terms of lines of code, the longer it's going to take to get through the funnel, because you know your teammates are going to take ages to review it because there's so much, and it's going to take you longer to write it. So, you know, all of those things will actually slow you down and mean that you won't be able to deliver as many PRs. So you'd be better trying to get, you know, make them smaller. And, you know, there are less than 200 lines is probably optimal. There are, you know, obviously times whenever you maybe wouldn't have that. You might have to deliver something big, but
Right.
Generally speaking, and we're able to see, so it's not just individual metrics, but the correlations and the impact that one can have on another. And that I find that really, really helpful.
Yeah, that's again, it's just about getting the basis of how do you look at it, how do you implement it. There was something I wanted to ask around, yes, so there are a few things that I come across again and again that I think of as like perennial challenges, because I don't believe there is an answer, and I think that makes it one of the most interesting things to talk about. So I think with data, there is a constant tension between improving data collection. So with an engineering mindset, you're always improving your code base, right? You're always like, well, we can make it better, we can make it better, we can make it better. And with data collection, the same thing applies, except that you then have this backwards comparison challenge. Is that something you've come across, that you want to be able to say, let's improve the data we collect, oh, but also we want to compare it to the data we had last year?
That is true, actually. Yes, I'm just thinking of it in terms of production deployments that we find. So we want to see the production deployment frequency, but we had to standardize on a tool. So we had a number of different CI/CD pipelines. Some, you know, we were sort of in a transition period of doing that. So we had to find a standard by which we counted the production deployments to be able to say, okay, everybody's doing that. But as everybody was onboarding to that, our production deployment volume went up. So it looked like the frequency was like, we were like, oh, but that wasn't true. So you had to go back and go, no, it's actually just as everybody's onboarding onto using this function, that then we had to be mindful of not giving you know, the wrong message, that we were exponentially delivering, you know, 20% more code whenever that might then decline next quarter. I usually look at things on a quarterly basis, because you do need a nice long sort of run at looking at trends. And so that, so we have seen that. So you do need a consistency in the data over time. And you also see that with teams. So, you know, some teams use story points to estimate, but that's all very well if you have historical data. But if you've got a brand new team, then they don't have any of that. So then you're like back to square one of terms of like, okay, well, you're going to have to just start again, find the smallest story, you know, and so forth. And yeah, sometimes finding a different way of finding that data is useful too. Story points is good. I've also used story counting, just of, you know,
number of stories.
That works as well. Surprising. I actually was having this conversation with somebody recently. This is slightly off topic, but people, I don't know, story counting is actually remarkably, there's maybe people on this call going, yes, we know this, but people always think of story points. Yeah, that's how we'll estimate for the sprint. But actually, if you look at the data of stories, number of stories, even if they're all different sizes, remarkably good data that's quite consistent over time.
And
Has been my
probably more consistent. Yeah.
Mm,
I really like that. I've not come across it before, but now I have. I'm going to be spreading the word about it
yeah.
because because it's about looking at the big picture again, right? It's about not saying, oh, let's try and get as accurate as we can at a small level, like this story is exactly twice the size of this story, or those judgment calls that you can't make because you
Mhm.
don't know exactly how big it's going to be when you're writing a story. That's why we no longer say this is going to take 2 hours, this is going to take 5 days. There's a
Yeah.
reason that we started approximating it into story points to start with.
Mhm.
And actually yeah, that's great. That's really cool. I'm really excited that you're doing that and that it's working.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, having historical data is really helpful. Yeah. I think maybe I can show you a book actually. That this one here. I don't know if anybody's come across this one. So it's How to Measure Anything by Douglas Hubbard. It's like what if you when you think you can't measure something, find out what you have that you can estimate with, so the boundaries of your data, and then work backwards from that. So trying to find what do you know, what can you measure, and then even if you don't know actuals, you might know a range, which will make things way more accurate. So
They're nothing, right?
better than nothing.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
yeah.
Oh,
So
that's very clever. Good. I'm keep the book recommendations coming. This is awesome. It's gonna
yeah, I it's let me just pop that in the chat. Somebody's just asked how to
So was the book for estimation, was that earlier in the chat as well? Was there, because we've
um
had 3 recommendations now, haven't we?
oh yes, the Accelerate book was the other one by Douglas. Oh yes, the one I mentioned earlier was the How to Measure Anything.
No, it was a different measure one, wasn't it?
Um, that one's yeah. Oh, Measure What Matters. Yes,
Yes.
that's it. Yes, so that was the other one. So that's the one on OKR. So yeah, that's. Let me just put that in there too. Yeah. So yeah, useful I think to sort of keep on top of like what's industry standard, what are other people, what can be measured. I think that's useful as well. And if you ever need, if you ever talking to engineers and they ask you, well, you say, well, and we're not just making this up. This is this is something that other people have done and have said is useful and so forth. So
And also let's do it empirically, like we can at least try it and see if
exactly.
it's useful rather than dismissing it.
Yeah, very, very much. So yeah, I mean, our journey to measuring has come full circle to a really positive place now. I hope all of our engineers feel and know that we're trying to give them tools and expertise to improve their own working environment. That it's not something that that they're being beaten over the head with, but it's the issue. It's a wee bit, like stepping on the scales for the first time and not realizing that you that you had a few more pounds on. So sometimes it can be quite surprising to people that that part of their funnel of delivery has got a blockage or something that they can improve, and it's only whenever you show it to them that they go, oh, I didn't realize. We've seen that a little bit with sometimes with PR reviewing, and we have cross teams cross site and in different time zones, and so they're quite aware of okay, well, we know we have to optimize, and so they would be quite proactive about, okay, well, we're going to we've got this process in place in order to make sure we're streamlined. But sometimes the other teams, you're all sitting together, actually forget that they're sometimes their PR reviews can sort of get a little shaky, and that's whenever you go, okay, you maybe just need a column in your sprint board to make them visible. Simple as that. But unless you measure it, you might not realize.
Yeah. Yeah. And I keep having thoughts and then just losing them as I'm about to say them. So Oh, because it's back to this point about it being for the benefit of the teams,
Mm-hmm.
and that I think that's such an important cultural baseline to have,
Yeah.
because there is nothing more frustrating and that's really going to impede your day-to-day work as having blockages, as feeling that you can't get things into production. It actually, people enjoy themselves more, broadly speaking, when things are working well and when the flow is working, like you say, so that they can get on with doing what they are there to do and excelling at it. And everyone enjoys being productive and achieving, right? That's a human.
It really is. Like, oh my goodness, so much. It is so important to engineers to be able to be able to just do your day job, just whenever. And whenever something goes well, when a system is in flow, whenever you can see, well, you can see the output of the team for a start, because they just seem to knock it out of the park.
Yeah,
But I love when you see a team that is just going, and you know that it's all of their systems, all of their practices, all of everything that they've just been able to focus on. It does take focus. It doesn't just happen. You definitely have to have everybody thinking, really smartly in terms of process. It's not rocket science, it's process. Really trying to, get all of the things out of the way that you need to in order to be able to concentrate and focus on the day job. But, and every meeting as well, just silly things like facilitation, like, making sure that people get things out of meetings if they have to attend them, and that they finish on time and that they have actions and all of those things. But allowing them to see then, if things aren't going well, giving them a tool to be able to look and see, okay, there's definitely things that are not going as well. What can we do? And then it might be a combination of all sorts of things that might aid it. It's not going to be the same for every team. And I think that's one thing that's slightly frustrating. And this is maybe the same for an engineering organization. Just because something's worked for us doesn't mean that you could take that to another org and necessarily make it work exactly the same way. You need to be cognizant of your context and your landscape. And actually, the DORA, the DevOps DORA report for 2022 was very clear in calling that out and saying context is everything. Not every team is in the same way. You've got the slowing and the flowing and so forth. And actually, for the DORA metrics, you might be in a different position. And I thought that was really that was a good, that resonated with us for sure. It just depends on your context and what you're doing. Like, for example, deployment frequency won't be the same in a team that's working on, a code base that's going to be retired, or a system that's winding down. And actually, it might be worse if you deliver it, more regularly. So that's
it's not cookie cutter, is it? It's not
no.
not a set of steps. It's about intelligently applying principles. To benefit to achieve the things you've decided that matter, right?
Yeah, very much. So we have some teams that are working in different ways and have different contexts. So love this. The bookshop. So, and that's fine. It's okay. But you need to know your context and you need to know what's okay. So that's where the visualization comes in, and that's where your tooling and your measuring come in. It's not okay. And I expect that from our engineering managers. I want to be able to talk to them and say, what's your team doing, and for them to know, and then share that context. So, that's important, because then, everything's okay. They say, well, this is how we work and this is why. And, a team, for example, that will have a lot more collaboration between customers, partners, or, some other department will probably deliver in a different way than a team that is completely, doesn't have any dependencies. They'll be able to fire things through much quicker. But we've also then seen, well, in a too fast is also not great, because then it can be overwhelming even for customers to see constant changes. So that's interesting too. Actually, we've seen that, delivering too fast.
And also, though, again, it's this central point of not being. You have to work out what you want to achieve, work out the best way to achieve it, not set up some metrics and then be driven by the metrics. For me, that's the message that's coming across really clearly from everything you're saying.
Oh, yeah.
You can't start just with metrics and say, what are good metrics? What does a 10x engineer achieve on their metrics? You can't start from that and work backwards. You have to start from, I suppose, common sense even, really.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't know if you've seen metrics being gamed. Oh,
right.
Hilarious. And we've seen not like over my decades of working in engineering, you definitely see the times whenever people try to pick up smaller stories in order to get their throughput up, or that's only one example, but when people, and that's, for me, that's really concerning, because then they're not feeling safe, they're worried, and that's not a place we want anybody to be. And that would be really concerning as well. I mean, we do all sorts of measuring. We measure. We use quarterly objectives for teams as well, just to keep the focus on business. Our business value, and that's really, really important. And teams come up with objectives. We use the OKR strategy of key results as well, so that they are measurable and that they are quantifiable in terms of delivery. And then we do we do a look back every quarter and say, well, how well did we do in that? And what would we do differently? So that's actually been really good. And so we marry that in with the engineering metrics as well. And you've got a really holistic approach to sort of to delivery, with a strong focus on the business objectives, of course.
Fantastic. So I'm aware we've only got about 20 minutes left, 15, 20 minutes. And I wanted to make sure that everyone watching has a chance to ask Virginia any questions that you have, maybe thinking about the ideas that she's been sharing in the context of your own business. So please do, if you have any questions, if you could put them in the Q&A. I will try and keep an eye on the chat as well. But if you put your questions in the Q&A, they will come up for us. And I suppose, Virginia, from me, like, the only other question I wanted to ask is, are there any other challenges you've had because it's great to hear such a positive story and hear what a positive place you're at now, but are there any other challenges where you're like, oh, we did have to get through this and that was difficult?
Yes. So one of the things, standardization of metrics. So we slightly touched on this earlier, but it was whenever you're measuring anything through 17 teams, you need to make sure that the data is consistent throughout all of those teams. So we were thinking about this recently in terms of production deployments. So this sounds like a really simple thing, but actually it was harder than I thought it was going to be. So what is a production deployment? Seems really simple, but is it just a build and deploy? Or do you count sysadmin things? Do you count SQL? If you're adding a row to a database, is that a production deployment? And what happens if one of your teams decides that is, and another team decides what actually sysadmin things aren't? So, it's just build and deploys. It's just deployments of new features or whatever we count. Then you're going to be in trouble, because the numbers will be inconsistent. So we then had to decide, okay, this is what a production deployment means to us, and then make sure that we counted it in the same way. But then if you change that, then as we said earlier, you go back and look at the numbers last quarter, and they may be different because you're now measuring things in a different way. So trying to get consistency in terms of data is quite tricky, which is why, I mean, I'm sure no one on this call would ever do this, ever. But if you use story points, if you use them, you would never, ever compare the story points from one team to another team. You shouldn't ever, because they will determine what a story point means in a different way from one team to another. So, you know, that's just, you couldn't do it. And they only use story points in order to estimate the amount of work that they forecast, the amount of work they're bringing into the next sprint. They would never use it for anything else. So, but yeah, you can try and get consistency where you need it in metrics is, yeah, kind of tricky.
And what I know you did mention earlier the kind of broad tools and techniques you used to help you here, i.e. communication.
Oh, I'm not sure what's happened to Zoe. We'll wait and see if she comes back. Are there any questions in the chat? Yeah, no worries. We'll wait until, I'm sure she'll be back 2 secs. I have one more book recommendation while we wait for Zoe. I don't know if anybody out there is using Kanban, but I'll pop this in the chat as well. This book, Actionable Agile Metrics for Predictability, by Daniel Vacanti, is one that I would recommend. Let me just put that in the chat. Actionable Agile Metrics for predictability. It's got some really nice, by Daniel Vacanti. It's got some really nice techniques around doing Monte Carlo predictability, which if you're using Kanban is really, really helpful. So we actually have used that for just with a massive data out of Scrum teams as well. But I would really recommend that if you're having to do estimation for sort of long running projects. It's really helpful. You do need a good bit of data, but it'll give you sort of estimations based on your current velocity, when you would expect to finish, you know, a number of stories or tasks or whatever it is. So that's a good one as well. I actually brought that on holiday one year and read it, and it was amazing. It was really good. Any other? Trying to think if there's any other books that I've used. I'd love to know actually what other people read or have found useful in the terms of agile metrics as well. Maybe it's just the canned reports. I mean, there are quite a lot of those tools out there that have good canned reports already. If anybody uses Jira, Jira Cloud, there's quite a lot of new ones. So that's good. Hi, Nick.
Hey, Virginia.
I can just talk. It's fine.
We didn't want to leave you. We didn't want to leave you hanging there. And you filled in. It was like you filled in like an absolute pro. So thank you for that. So thanks for everybody. I'm Nick from CTO Craft, and I lurk in the background of these for instances just like this.
Yeah.
And Zoe's back, so we're all good.
I'm so sorry. Yeah, it just thanks, Nick, and thanks, Virginia. Right. Yeah, that was so awesome. I actually got my sound and being able to see what was happening back first, so I could see how well you were handling it, which really took the pressure off. Like, yeah. Why has the system just kicked me out?
I went back to the shadows for me.
Yeah. So we're all set. I just have another book recommendation. I just fired it in there. So
amazing. Well, I think that we're kind of getting close to the end anyway, aren't we? Is there anything we haven't covered?
Yeah, I'm just thinking if there's anything else that I was gonna cover. Yeah, challenges. Yeah, I mean, I think I sort of said that anyway, but any kind of reports that we have are only as good as the data. So you really do need to encourage teams to look after their data. And that's really boring. That can be really boring administrative tasks.
Yeah.
So they aren't always on board with that, but it is really important. So like, for example, closing out tasks or stories, or if you use features or epics or whatever, you do need to be sort of really, like, I would measure, like, for example, the average time it takes for features to be completed. So that means that you need to close out those tickets promptly, and you can do that sometimes by automation or whatever. But your data is only as good as what you're given. So sometimes I have to go around the houses and say, we need you to be a bit more careful on your administration. So you need to close out things at the ends of when it's done. So that's kind of boring, but it's important. Otherwise, it's going to be tricky.
Right, otherwise you're not getting the value from it.
Exactly.
And have you got any like heuristics that you use for spotting when the data's not there? Because while it's obviously challenging to have to go and fix things and have to tell people to sort things out, for me, the kind of nightmare scenario is that the data's not good enough and no one spots it, and people are making decisions with bad data. I think that's almost worse than not having it at all. So is there anything, what are the things that make you go, hold on, there's something not right here?
Ooh, yeah, I have a couple of tools that I actually just found on Google where I was trying to I had number of user stories over a vast number of sprints, and I was able to use a tool that said, okay, the consistency of this data is good, it's actually worth, so it was like a calculation that said, okay, this is consistent enough data for us to be able to calculate and then run some Monte Carlo on, that was able to output some estimations. So yeah, and then correlations. So you can run, like, even in spreadsheets, you can run like the sort of correlation function that says, okay, the correlation between these two sets of data is greater than 0.7 and therefore good, or whatever. So sometimes there's actually tools out there that will allow you to compare data and say, yes, that's good or not. Sometimes if, like, for example, in epics or whatever, or features, if I find out that some we've actually got much longer cycle times than I'm expecting, I think it's probably the hygiene of the thing is probably, I don't believe this is actually the case. And then I think I'll probably just have to put some automation in there.
Yeah. And I think that's nice as well, to be able to have this feel of, okay, this is just something simple that needs to be sorted out, versus, oh, hold on, this is a problem.
Yeah.
And being able to respond, and that's kind of the magic of data, right? Isn't it? And
yeah, exactly.
And having the processes set up in the right way so that you do get that kind of understanding. Would you say that your kind of human understanding of the data you've been able to hone that as you've had consistent data? You kind of get more of an instinct for.
Yes, I definitely think that. Yes, and if that if you're looking at something for a long time, you'll notice things in it much more, and you'll know what to expect as well. So, and you do need to it's probably where the engineering operations function for us has been successful, because you've got people focused on it much more, whereas nobody else is really doing that. And everybody has a day job, engineering managers and tech leads to a certain extent, but if you don't have some people who are actually looking at that data all the time and really collating it and managing, then that will be more tricky, I think. So you definitely need somebody who's aware and definitely has that awareness to be able to say whether it's good or not. That's a good point.
Yeah, to get that kind of like depth of insight.
Yes.
Yeah. Very cool. All right, well, if we don't have any questions, I'll do a last little check for any questions to make sure we haven't missed any. I will just wrap up by saying that you can connect with Virginia or with me if you want to. We're going to share some links in the chat for you now. Thanks everyone for joining today. The next event in the diary is going to be on Thursday, the 29th of June, in partner with, sorry, my script, I'm pretty sure that says jellyfish, but it read as Jellify, and I was like, in partnership with Jellify. Now I'm pretty sure. we're going to be hosting a CTO's guide to effectively communicating the business impact of engineering, which is incredible. So once you've got and implemented all your amazing metrics with using all these techniques you've learned from Virginia, next week you can learn how to go and communicate that. That's going to be with Rob Morchan, who is the CTO at Vestwell. And just a little bit of blurb for that. Achieving cross-functional alignment throughout an organization is often easier said than done, and it starts at the top. So how do you effectively gain alignment to make sure the work of the engineering organization is actually supporting business goals and translate the influence of engineering into language that the business understands? So join us to hear the perspective of a CTO who's been there as he shares his stories, coupled with actionable takeaways and best practices that you can apply to your organization to communicate the business impacts of engineering. So that's now live on the site. So if you'd like to sign up, please do. And just finally, I would like to say such a massive thank you to Virginia for coming and being so open and sharing just such amazing tools and techniques and perspectives on in such a human way. I love it when engineering teams are run in a human way. I think it's so important. And for coping when I disappeared briefly. Yeah, thank you so much, Virginia.
You're welcome. All right, thank you, Zoe, and